Welcome back. You're watching Sunday edition here on KTN News. A lot of feedback on social media on our conversation here this Sunday morning. Data says, does a driver consult passengers on what speed to drive the bus? The answer is no. Chebukati should stop the side shore. And one here from William Musyoka says the Supreme Court of Kenya was clear. The constitutional applicable laws were not the guiding factors on the 8th of August, hence a direct to run fresh elections as prescribed. And then Mukuria Philip says he should do what it takes to have elections. If not, he be accountable. Court order on the 1st of September 2017. Keep the conversation going online on social media. The hashtag to use is hashtag Sunday Edition. Now, as we get into this conversation of the run-up to the presidential election, let's take a look at the history of boycotts of election in this country. Remember, NASA has said there will be no election on the 26th of October 2017. Our political affairs reporter, Moremi Mwangi, takes a look at the history of elections boycotts in this country. Take a look.
The politics of election boycott dates back to the first Kenyan multi-party elections of 1992. When then opposition figureheads, including future President Mwai Kibaki and the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, threatened to lead their supporters to boycott the polls, demanding electoral reforms.
Once Section 2A was withdrawn, allowing for multipartyism, people thought that was enough. But there were sufficient voices in the country that felt that wasn't enough, that Moi would still.
But the boycott call was quickly abandoned as infighting within the Forum for Restoration of Democracy took center stage, splitting the giant party into Kenneth Matiba's Ford Asili, Jaramogi's Ford Kenya, and Kibaki's Democratic Party. A serious blunder that handed Moi an easy win of only 36% of the votes. But the demand for electoral reforms intensified before the 1997 elections, and this time, one man made good his threat to boycott the elections. Veteran politician Kenneth Matiba. Unfortunately, all the Ford Asili MPs quickly abandoned him for alternative parties except then Nakuru East legislator Francis Wanyange.
If Matiba had kind of remained on the ballot, all the votes that Kibaki got, perhaps this time they would have gone to Matiba. And then if he remained with the likes of Shikuku and gotten a bit of Western Province, he stood a higher chance than Kibaki. But then, like I've said, there were also health issues and other dynamics.
Fast forward to 20 years later, and opposition leader Raila Odinga has announced withdrawal from next week's repeat presidential poll, alongside his running mate Kalonzo Musyoka.
Good afternoon. Is it afternoon?
A move that has put electoral body IEBC at crossroads and pushed the country to the edge of a political crisis. But unlike in past boycotts, this time there is a twist. A court of law will rule whether Odinga should be barred from quitting next week's election, in a verdict to be delivered by Justice Chacha Mwita on Tuesday next week, in a petition filed by Jubilee-inclined Pokot South MP David Kosing, even as debate continues on whether Odinga and Kalonzo ought to fill Form 24A to actualize their withdrawal from the poll.
That form is an idea of people who are still in denial, who refuse to accept that this withdrawal has taken place.
What worries me is not even having an election on 26th. Is what position is Kenya going to be in from 26th to 2022?
If our Jubilee, the way forward is not to allow Raila play where he plays best, is to remove Raila from the trenches. You get it? Because he wants to create a state of rebellion in the country. And that once that fills the air, you cannot control it.
As confusion and uncertainty reigns over the Kenyan political future, October 26th will no doubt be akin to the Kenyan date with destiny, even as debate continues on Odinga's withdrawal from the repeat poll. Moremi Mwangi, KTN News in Nairobi.
Thank you, Marim Wangida, reporting. That is just one side of the story, the boycott by NASA. The other part of the story, of course, Jubilee saying the election will go ahead. Chebukati wanted to meet the two presidential candidates earlier last week. Uhuru Kenyatta did not show up. Raila Odinga did meet with Chebukati. And Uhuru Kenyatta has insisted that there's nothing to talk about with the Electoral Commission chairman.
Sisi kuna sharti moja tumepatia IEBC. Sisi tulisema IEBC fanyeni kazi yenu. Mumewahi kusikia mimi ama William tukitaja mambo ya IEBC? Sisi tumesema kura ni ya mwananchi, sisi tunarudi kwa wananchi. IEBC, wewe unelipwa na pesa ya serikali na ya wananchi. Tumekupatia na imetengwa 12 billion ya kufanya uchaguzi. Wewe kazi yako sio kuingilia sisi wanasiasa. Wewe panga uchaguzi. Si ni namna hiyo? IEBC ipange nini? Sisi tuende tuka campaign kwa wananchi wetu, tuombe kura, wananchi waamue. Kusema ya kwamba lazima tuongee na huyu, mimi na sina shida na IEBC, mimi naenda kuongea nini? Me have no problem.
So 3 days to go, and the IEBC did receive the first batch of the presidential ballot papers. And Raila Odinga, of course, has insisted he will not be part of that election. Here is him talking about his presence or lack of it on that presidential ballot.
Of the electoral process. But as you see, the commission has insisted all the times that our name should remain on the ballot for no apparent reason. And yesterday, an announcement was made that my names are going to be in the ballot, whether I like it or not. This I found to be strange because we had written formally to the commission withdrawing from the process. They've been talking about Form 24A, which only applies if there was a fresh nomination. But there was no fresh nomination because, as you know, the court had cancelled the other election. And ordinarily would have been required to do a fresh nomination and in accordance with the Supreme Court's opinion of 2013. But that was not done. We were just gazetted again as the two candidates in this electoral process. So,
conversation from that point, gentlemen, and Raila Odinga's name will be on that ballot paper, whether he likes it or not. That is what he was told, because he did not sign. Remember that discussion about signing that Form 24A. Let's talk about the two gentlemen, Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. And one has insisted there will be no election. He withdrew from the repeat election. Uhuru Kenyatta has insisted there will be an election, and he has said he is not going to be, to talk to the IEBC. They were left to do their job. That is his point of view. Dismas, is Raila Odinga's game plan getting muddied by the fact that his name will be on that ballot paper? Therefore, he would look bad because he's the one who's withdrawing from the election.
Well, let's go back and ask ourselves how we got here. It's because the Supreme Court ordered IBC to do an election that respects the Constitution and all the relevant procedures. And Mr. Chebukati has not behaved in a manner suggesting that he actually respects the Supreme Court ruling. So it would be very naive for us to expect Mr. Raila Odinga to go to this election in the same environment which has maintained a status quo. And one has to give President Kenyatta a pat on the back by saying that he has no business meeting with the IBC. Because really he has no business meeting with IBC. Mr. Chebukati should be doing his own work, and he should be able to deliver a free, fair, and credible election. But from Mr. Chebukati himself, he has admitted that right now he doesn't have the capacity to do that. And if what Dr. Akombe said is anything to go by, that the commissioners have been held hostage, that the secretariat has been held hostage, it would be naive for anybody to go to an election where one player is running the show. Using the example of soccer, and I know the panelists are at home, if Manu is going to play...
Which player in this instance?
Well, I'm going to demonstrate that shortly.
All right.
If Manu is going to play with Arsenal, and then it's Manu which is allowed to get a referee for that match, then the outcome is almost predictable. So it's up to Chiloba to actually come out and tell us. The Supreme Court said there were illegalities, irregularities. We have identified them. we have cured them. Now the playing field is level for all of us to go and participate in this election. And the October 26th election has got nothing to do with President Kenyatta or with Mr. Raila Odinga. It's about the will of Wanjiku, the cumulative interest and aspirations for the nation. That if you come from Mandera, you go and cast your ballot, your vote is going to count. If you come from my village in Kisii, you go and cast your ballot, it's going to count. But at this stage, Chebukati has not convinced anybody. You can go queue all day, you are rained on, but your vote may not count at the end of the day.
Right.
And you know that's what he's not been able to deliver. So, in my view, what Mr. Raila Odinga is doing is exercising his democratic rights, and he has told his voters, because I don't believe that IBC is going to deliver a free, fair election, please keep off.
All right.
It's not to say that anybody who is going to be in the queue is going to get a beating. I recall, I don't understand his mother tongue, but he said in Bondo that anybody who wants to go and cast their ballots, respect them. Do not engage in any form of violence. But if you're planning to vote for me, please don't show up on that particular day.
Mark.
You know, we are discussing 3-4 issues and we've lumped them together, and that's why we're getting confused. Number one, stepping away from an election is not equal to saying there is no election. These two things are different. Everyone is allowed to legally say, listen, this activity that is going on, I don't want to be a part of it, and that is okay. Then there's the second issue of saying that since I'm not part of this election, then there'll be no election. And that's where you run into problems, because number one, if my ball is not in play, then I do not have a say in how that game will be played, because I'm no longer in the game. So the honest truth is this: if Raila has withdrawn, he cannot then say how Ekuru Okot and Abduba Dida are going to play the match against Uhuru Kenyatta. And if Raila is out of the game, then the biggest loser of a botched IEBC process becomes Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto in the process. Why? Because he is the one who stands the most to lose going into this election. Ekuru Okot has not campaigned a day after the Supreme Court ruling. The only campaigns he has done is after we saw his face after the ruling. So the person who's got everything to lose in this election is Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. In fact, for Raila Odinga, should he not participate, his status quo remains the same. So for Uhuru Kenyatta is the one whose card is in play, he's the one whose ball is up for question. So the fact of the matter is this: the country needs to get to the point where we say, if Raila Odinga is boycotting the election, let him do the credible thing and say, you know what, I have boycotted the election and I will not participate in an election until this happens. However, this particular election that is going to go on, why is he saying that it has to stop? If you withdraw, then you cannot say how it is. You cannot divorce your wife and then declare how she's going to live in her house.
All right. Hezbon, boycotting the election vis-a-vis saying there will be no election.
Let me use the word that they used, that they are not essentially boycotting, but they've withdrawn from the race. And I also understand why NASA is saying that there will be no election, because if you look at the pieces of legislation that have been interpreted differently by different people, there is one that is critical, and it's a case law, the Maina Kiai case, which says that the presidential election is held at the constituency level. So on that basis alone, you can actually see why there are people who are saying that there will be no election. Because what will happen, there is no guarantee that it will take place in the 291 constituencies that we have in Kenya today. But I think having said that, it's also important to note that in as much as the political players have nothing to discuss with IEBC, you know, the public expects a situation where we see the political players, especially the key political players, being in agreement with the processes that have been put in place by IEBC. And I think the ball is on President Uhuru Kenyatta's court. You know, when he goes to a public rally and he says, I have no problem with IEBC, as we're expecting IEBC to conduct this election, there is a narrative that he's entrenching, and probably he doesn't know. Maybe his advisors should tell him. He's actually entrenching that narrative in the perception of the Kenyan public that IEBC and Jubilee are one and the same. You know, so I want to believe, and what Mark is saying is true, that it is in the interest of whoever is going to win this election to have the most serious competitors on the ballot. And specifically for President Uhuru Kenyatta, it is in his own interest that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga is on the ballot and participates in this election.
All right.
That one is looking increasingly impossible right now.
Mutinda.
My first question is it. is this? Whose duty is it to decide whether the election was in conformity with the Constitution and the rules? Is it the candidates, or is it an independent party or institution like the judiciary? That's the first question. Because there is a difference between you stole from me and you will steal from me. Because in 2017, we went for an election. Someone felt like some constitutional provisions and the law had been violated, and they went to court. And the court agreed with them and said that we need to do this again. Now, instead of doing this again, you decide that no, these people are going to repeat what they did last time. Yet the same institution had said, in case that this is repeated and the matter ends up here, because that is what the constitutional framework is very clear, then we will not hesitate to again. Then one party decides, no, they won't even do that. We are sure. It's like I fought with Esbon. I took him to court for assault, and I decided that I'm not going to sit next to Esbon again because Esbon is going to again assault me. And how then do I expect people now to adjudicate on that? I am yet to be assaulted. The last time he assaulted me, we went to court and the matter was sorted out. Right. Yes. And here I am stuck that no, I cannot share a panel again with Esbon because he's going to assault me. How then do we deal with that? Because this is the situation here. The question of whether this election is going to be free, fair, verifiable, credible is really not for the parties. The parties are at liberty to go to court again in case there is any violation. And that is how the rule of law works.
Thank you, Mutinda.
Yes.
Mr. Meso, what do you think about the decision by NASA and the NASA presidential candidate, Raila Odinga, to boycott or to withdraw from the election, whichever term you would use? Who is going to lose from this?
Yes, Ben. Raila Odinga having withdrawn from election does not mean that there shall be no election, because elections in this country are not defined by Raila's participation. Now, what we should be talking about is how does the government ensure that there shall be no violence on 26th? Because we have other players in the field. It's not only Uhuru Kenyatta. The Jubilee Party has gone ahead to carry out its campaign. Because even me, I'm part of the Jubilee Party campaign. Yesterday, I had a very successful campaign rally in Dagoretti North, where the perceived ODM supporters actually joined me in campaigning for re-election of Uhuru Kenyatta. So what we should be talking about is how does government ensure that there shall be no violence during 26th repeat election time. Now, the biggest loser will be Kenyans if IEBC does not go ahead to hold that election. We should go ahead to hold the election and let the people decide who their president should be in the next 5 years, and whoever is aggrieved the way NASA did, they should go back to court again. Because the court shall also narrate on the procedures,
yes,
and also give directions whether the Constitution was violated. Because the Constitution does not say that one party, the so-called opposition, must participate in election.
So you and your Jubilee and your fellow Jubilee contingent are okay with the IBC to conduct the election as it is, even though the chairman says that he cannot guarantee it will be free, fair, and credible?
Chairman saying that he cannot guarantee free and fair, credible election does not mean that election should not take place. Because what he said is as per himself, in the current environment within the IEBC, okay, something that's subject to change if he decides that he wants to make those changes that are required, that deem fit to him that this is the environment that can guarantee free and fair election. Now, to myself is IEBC can still go ahead and give results as per the people's will. What is important, let all players, the NASA, who are out, don't interfere, and those like the Ukuru Court and so forth, have their agents in every polling station who will ensure that there's nothing like rigging, there's nothing like the so-called malpractices, everything has to be in conformity with the Constitution and the IEBC Election Act.
All right, thank you, sir. Dismas.
Well, you know, Ben, in this race, it's about the animal farm, where you have presidential candidates, and then you have presidential candidates. The presidential candidates in this race is President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Ekura Aukot, Dida, and others are going to run, but they're only running because they want to remind us the kind of leadership that this nation needs.
But it wouldn't be fair to say that they do not matter just because one candidate is withdrawing.
When you look at the absolute numbers, you know, you may want to be politically correct and say every Tom, Dick, and Harry matters in the presidential race. But at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, you have two candidates, Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Anybody who is participating in that race, like for instance, Aukot is a bright chap. When he addresses the media, it reminds you of the kind of visionary leadership that we need in future. But his absence or presence is immaterial. And the earlier we stop being politically correct, the better it is for the nation. Because right now, all of a sudden, Aukot has got a newfound energy. It's like he's taken a Red Bull, he's addressing a lot of meetings. But we know for a fact that his presence is supposed to sort of legitimate the entire process. It's only a naive man who will go home saying whether Raila is in the ballot or not, it's going to be business as usual. That is now burying our heads deep in the sand, wet sand, and hoping that everything is going to be okay. At the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves three fundamental questions. Number one, when did Mr. Chebukati realize that, in fact, he cannot deliver a free, fair, and credible election? Is it after Dr. Akombe resigned? When did he realize this? Number two, when did he realize that any proposal he takes to the full plenary is going to be outvoted 4-3? Is he telling us that he's incapable of invigorating the commission, that when he wants to come up with a new idea, they can discuss an issue and it comes through consensus? Is he suggesting to us that all commissioners were behaving like robots, that when you place a question on the table, 4 people will automatically vote one side and 3 will automatically vote the other side? And going back to what Kavemba had indicated, again, you know, all lawyers will say the Constitution is very clear. But in this case, it seems to be very ambiguous. The Supreme Court has said, consistent with the Constitution, that we must have an election within 60 days. And it must be held in strict conformity with the Constitution and all the relevant procedures. And this, Chebukati is saying, while we are supposed to have this election within 60 days, it seems to be the case that I'll not be able to adhere to the relevant constitutional obligations and the laws. So do you say that I must deliver an election within 60 days, the way Mr. Meso is saying, whether or not it's going to be free, fair, and credible, let me do it within 60 days? Right. Or do you pause and say, can you address these illegalities and irregularities so that we can now have an election that everybody is acceptable
Important question you ask here. Mark, does the absence of Raila Odinga, supported by millions of Kenyans, make this repeat election illegitimate?
And again, we need to separate issues. Number one, does Kenya need to have an election? Does Kenya need to move on? Do Kenyans need a stable country? Yes, we all do. Whether in NASA or Jubilee, you have this sense that Kenya needs to move on. Part of that moving on is avoiding a constitutional dilemma where we go beyond the 60 days and get into a place where it's a gray area. That we can all agree on. However, and I want to agree with Dismas, handling the 44%, 46%, 48%, whatever percentage of support that Raila Odinga carries becomes a matter of national importance. And that is not going to be solved by an election. Even if Raila Odinga was on the ballot and he lost 49-51, this country would still not find stable ground as far as that constituency is concerned. So the reality of the matter is this. The first dialogue we must have is we must have a dialogue of the ballot. Let us see where the numbers lie. And whether he participates or not, we will see where the numbers lie, because certain people will come out to vote and other people will not come out to vote. And we know that 0 is a number. So the tallying centers and the constituencies that will return 0 will tell this nation that, listen, we in constituency X do not feel included in this national conversation. Okay? Right. Once we are past the elections, we need to come back to the debate. And this is the debate that I'm talking about. Not the debate of individuals, of Uhuru versus Raila, but the debate of a nation, at the debate over people and where do we want this nation to be. Because the confusion comes into place. Because when you mention Raila to some people, they get very scared. Other people get very excited. But we need to come to a point where we are discussing what do we want as a nation. Remove the people and say, where are we going? So the election is not going to solve that. But we need to move ahead.
Hesbon, what is your take on this?
I think Mark keeps talking about we are clumping things together and we need to separate them into four, and he doesn't do that. I would expect him to do that. And then the second thing he says, and I'm not responding to you, but I'm just interested in what you're saying, that we need to talk about the people, but half of the time he's talking about Raila. And I think that is the problem. Everyone is thinking that this election is about the right Honorable Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta, which is far from the point. The point is, do Kenyans need an election? Yes. Do they need an election that the chairman of the IBC has said he cannot guarantee is going to be free, fair, and credible? And I can tell you without any fear of contradiction that that election is not needed by both Kenyans in Jubilee and in NASA. The leadership might want that kind of an election from one side of the divide for obvious reasons. And the more they keep drumming the fact that we need to have this election and get over with it, the more they're raising suspicions. Ben, it is like telling people about to cross a river that this river has so many dangerous things inside. There are crocodiles, there are snakes, there are hippos, there are monitor lizards, and so on and so forth. But what we need to do at the moment is cross. Crossing is more important than the dangers that are inherent in the river, which is terribly wrong. If we can get to sort out the river and have everything in the river safe for crossing, why not? I don't understand the reason why we should all be running to an election whose consequences we don't know, we can't deal with. If anyone is thinking that this is about Raila or Uhuru, I think they're mistaken. As a matter of fact, when the Supreme Court vacated Uhuru's victory, I think Raila reached the apex of his political dreams.
All right, Mutinda, give us your thoughts on this.
Yes, I want to separate the issues, and there are two issues there. They are constitutional. According to me, yes, that's why I want to separate them, because we are talking about different issues, we are mixing them, but for me, I want to be very clear what the issues are. They are constitutional and legal issues. They are constitutional and legal issues. The Constitution is very clear that in the case where a presidential election result has been annulled, then we need to go back for a fresh election within 60. That is a constitutional and legal issue. Then there are political issues. What my opinion is this, that if we do not hold elections before the 1st of November, we will get into a constitutional and legal crisis as well as a political crisis. But if we do the election as per the Constitution and as per the Supreme Court ruling, we will have taken care of the constitutional and legal issues, and we will then deal with the subsequent political issues. There are, of course, there is the party that would want us to get into the legal, constitutional, legal, and political crisis at the same time, but there is the party that wants first to deal with the constitutional and legal issues, which, of course, means that we need to have a repeat election by 1st of November as per the Constitution, which was supported by the ruling of the Supreme Court. Then whatever political issues now come up, of course, we are not going to bury our heads in the sand regarding that. It is an ongoing process. We will have to now look at what are these political issues that are making our country so polarized. But that, to me, is a better situation than getting into a constitutional, legal, and political crisis at the same time.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's take a quick commercial break here on the show. This is Sunday edition on KTN News. We are talking about the repeat presidential election set to go down on the 26th of October this year. That is this coming Thursday. It is 3 days and 18 hours to the ballot. We are talking about issues being put forth by both sides of the political debate. When we return, we talk about the possible scenarios that Kenya could be facing in the next 3 days. Also, is it a possibility that the chairman of the IBC, Ofula Wanyonyi Chebukati, could resign from the Electoral Commission? What would that mean? What are the cards that both Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta have hidden under their sleeves? We'll talk about all that and more. Let's take a quick commercial break. Let's leave you with our sound of the week.
I cannot continue to be pushed by majority commissioners to accept legal opinions that serve partisan interests and are not grounded in the Constitution and the law. In the least, I find this as intellectual dishonesty for which my professional training demands that I abhor. I would rather bow out with my name intact and my head lifted high than be part of a process where personal interests dwarf the interest of the nation.